start with a tour?
Yeah, let's do
Okay.
it.
Patients come in through the door. The first thing they do is go check in right here at the front desk. So if they have to give like a UA sample or see a counselor or see a medical provider, they'll be told right there and then. If they're just receiving their medication, then they'll be put in the queue. And so they'll meet with a nurse to receive their dose of medication.
How many people do you see a day coming?
Approximately 500 a day. They're no longer having withdrawal symptoms. So that's why you see so many coming in, because they do feel better.
Yeah, the way methadone works in your brain is it actually stabilizes your brain chemistry. So when somebody stops using heroin, their brain chemistry stops producing endorphins on its own. And so you can replace those missing endorphins with a medication like methadone or Suboxone, and so it stops the withdrawal. So in the first 90 days in treatment, you're allowed one take-home dose, and that's on Saturdays.
But is there concern about diversion?
Typically not. We do diversion checks all the time too. So if a patient does have take-home privileges, like even the patients that have 28-day take-home privileges, we'll call them back randomly throughout the month and have them bring their bottle in, because the bottles are actually sealed. And so they'll have to bring in the supply that they have left. And if they've used more than they should have, then that means they're not using their medication as intended. If somebody wants to divert methadone or an opioid, this is the hardest way to get access to it. To actually qualify for the diagnosis opioid use disorder, there's a number of criteria that have to be met. You have to have been using for a certain amount of time or had gone through detox a couple times. And once those criteria are met, then you would be able to receive treatment from us. So medications such as methadone, Suboxone, or Vivitrol in conjunction with the psychosocial therapy. The research is starting to show that about 3 years in treatment is the amount of time it takes. So when you actually look at brain scans of people who are suffering from opioid use disorder, you'll see that that at the 2-year mark, their brains are still starting to stabilize from the heavy opioid use. And so that's why if you put somebody through detox that has an opioid use disorder through like a 28-day abstinence-based residential treatment program, is not going to phase them, because their brain's going to be healing for the next 2 years. And so the medication really helps their brain stabilize so that they can deal with the psychosocial components that might be the root cause of their addiction. So that's why we do the therapy in conjunction with the medication.
You talked about the need because of such an epidemic. What are you doing right now to address the need?
So, it's ironic. Even if the need wasn't growing, the epidemic is growing, if that makes sense, because the need's always been there. I mean, for the last couple of years, there's a large amount of people in this country who are not getting treatment, but are not even acknowledging that they need treatment. So 95.5% of active drug users don't acknowledge that they need help. The issue of identifying, engaging people who need to get into treatments, right? That concept right there is something that we actually don't talk a lot about. What do you say to somebody to get them to get into treatments? You know, I lost a sister to a heroin overdose, and I asked that question all the time, like, what could I have done? I mean, we did like interventions and stuff like that, but you'll see, I mean, you hear people say, I hit rock bottom over and over and over and over and over again. I overdosed 3 or 4 times before getting into treatment. So it's not necessarily hitting rock bottom that gives people that aha moment. And so how do you engage those people to get into treatment? Well, that's what we need to figure out. And so if you could get clinics closer to the people in need, then you're gonna break down more and more of the barriers that are stopping them from getting into treatment. So the easier we could make it for people to get access to treatments, the more people are going to get into treatment, because addiction is a disease that's constantly telling people not to get into treatment, you know. And so so we need to provide all means necessary to break down any of the barriers in their mind and that's stopping them from getting into treatment. I mean, we opened the first 24/7 clinic like this in the country back in October, and we've intaked 4,000 patients in the first year. And we did that because, you know, we like to think of it as this moment of hope. That's what we call it, where somebody might make a decision at 3 a.m. to get into treatment, and if you don't get them into treatment right then and there, an hour later they might change their mind. So we do open at 4:30 in the morning, our clinics, so people could get their medications prior to going to work. And the research actually shows, in our clinics, our own internal research shows that employment rates increase by about 78% at the 6-month mark when people enter treatment. And so when we opened the 24/7 clinic, I think AZ Republic covered the clinic and interviewed a patient, and she entered treatment, and she had been on heroin for like 4 years, and entered treatment. 2 weeks later, she came in and she said, I got reunited with my kids that were taken away from me, and I have 2 jobs. Like 2 weeks into treatment. When you bring in medication-assisted treatment into environment, overdose death rates decrease by 75%. They've actually looked at entire countries like China, pre-MAT and post-MAT, and seen the same thing, 75% decrease in overdose death rates when you bring in medication. So we do the research on where there's high rates of overdose death rates, and we open clinics in those neighborhoods. Even here in Mesa, when we tried to open, it took us a while to get this facility. We had on this street here, we had a multitude of landlords that wouldn't rent to us, sellers that wouldn't sell to us. We went to get a conditional use permit on a piece of property, and they called us the night before and said, don't even come, don't bother showing up, because we've had so much opposition to your treatment program. And I remember talking to one guy, and he said, I've had my building broken into like 5 times in the last week by drug addicts, and they're leaving needles. This is right up the street from here. And I'm like, so what do you want to do about that? Do you want to stick your head in the sand and think it's just problem's gonna go away? Do you want to have more police presence to arrest them? Do you want to, let's think about pragmatic solutions here. What are you going to do? Bringing a treatment center is what's going to treat the patients. Why wouldn't you be more welcoming of that?
So just right here in this neighborhood, it was a problem.
Oh yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem in many, many, many neighborhoods. These are, would you talk about your sons or daughters like you talk about our patients? Because at some point, we're all going to be impacted, if we haven't been already, by an addiction in our immediate circle of friends or family. And so these are our fellow Americans, fellow human beings, whatever perspective you want to look at it from. I don't understand not helping people that are in need and not wanting to help people in need. I think if we approach addiction from a place of compassion, we're going to have more success, and I think everybody's starting to realize that.